I see a bad moon rising. So yeah, we got the VFC XM177 E2, and this one's a game changer. You know, I don't feel like this has had as much exposure as it really deserves. Does that make sense? Yeah, look at those trades. We'll get the trades to start with because they are exact to the real steel. I've held a real steel deact and they are exact. Yeah, little things about this, you know, it's just a quick one because it's one of my favorites in my collection. So obviously I knew from being I guess you could call amateur historian, Vietnam, I expected them to do this plastic fantastic, and they didn't. They did it aluminum for my American guys out there and aluminium for the Brits, but they did, and I didn't expect that. VFC didn't have to do that, and I actually did make it correct to build. Does that make sense? The only thing I'd say about it is it is a little stiff to move, but I usually just keep mine there anyways and lock it in place, so that doesn't matter. We've got teardrop forward assist, which is correct for the time. We've got reinforcements, which is correct for the time frame, which is 69 onwards. Obviously we've got the 20 round mag. The magazine that comes with the piece actually does have, look at those brilliant ass markings, look at those. But replacement magazines don't have them, which I would have loved to see replacement magazines actually have them. So I guess if you're flush or rich, you can just buy a load of XM177s and just take the mags out of them, which makes no sense. Or I guess you could take the replacement mags to a someone that's doing laser etching and get that done. Anyways, there's too much about that. But yeah, those markings for the bottom of the magazines are really nice, and I do think actually late war they just abandoned doing that because obviously grunts were just dropping them in the bush, and yeah, they were actually marketed, I don't think marketed is the right word, but they were issued as disposable magazines. We have the maker's proof mark, which I've obviously brought down a little bit, but that was actually there on the real steel. The real steel, these maker's marks were just a little bit forward, but at the end of the day, someone in the factory is just going to be stamping them in, aren't they? The moderator, not a suppressor, people. I've heard it called a suppressor. So there's a myth going around, and people said, oh, you know, this was to make it sound like an AK-47. That's not the truth at all, because tier 1 guys were just using AKs, you know. So this was because it was technically an SPR. They the muzzle flash, the muzzle flare that you were getting out of this beast in the bush, in the jungle, humping the boonie, was nearly as long as my forearm. So they actually had to make a moderator that would negate that. Does that make sense? It does change the sound pitch a little bit, but that's what that was for. It was nothing to do with making it sound like an AK. That didn't make any GD sense. I'll get that sling out of the way. Obviously I'm using a modernized sling for it, but you know, that's because the Vietnam slings are dog shit, to be honest. Yeah, obviously we got selective fire, semi-safe, full auto. Although I will say on the 20 round mags, it does splutter a little bit. The mag drop on these things is awesome. It just wants to give. Yeah, so I don't want to go over this too long. You know, obviously all of the sights are adjustable. We've got the wheel type, if you can call it that. We've got day and night sights with it as well. And yeah, obviously I've put an impasse into this. And the trigger on it is excellent. Feels real steel. Really, really chunky trigger there with that. And obviously I've just put the paracord on it because that's what they did. At least that's what they did later on. Because the whole slinging options with the M16 pattern rifles was just not working, you know. And if you know, you know, really. I'm not going to go too much into that. But yeah, I'll put some gas in this and I'll show you. What I'm going to do is actually use a 30 rounder from the M16A2 because they were issued 30 rounders. It is actually. They were issued 30 rounders because obviously it was spec ops. Tier 1 units or alerts that were being given the XM177 rifles, the carbines, and so it made sense that they would give them higher capacity magazines. Anyone that tells you that the 30 rounders were not in Vietnam, they are point blank wrong. It did come late war, but they were there. Semi-auto. One switch. to the end, so getting to the end of the gas. Yeah, that's the VFC XM177 E1. Yeah, it's been overlooked. I feel like it's been a little bit overlooked. There are a few videos about it, but it's really not gotten the exposure that it deserves. It's completely iconic, you know. So, yeah, we'll see you in the next one. I'm Nocturnal. This is Nocturnal Nonsense. Yeah.